To Friday night's elimination final, Carlton and the Sydney Swans. And Lloydie, Carlton have been the in-form team at the moment, despite losing that last home and away game to the Giants. How do they get the job done against the Swans?
Depth through the midfield and bully them, beat them up. I think that's when they played their best. So think of Michael Voss as a player. That is when Carlton are at their best as a team. And I thought they weren't that against the Giants last week. They've been that in most games, whether it was Chera and Walsh just coming back into the team. But when they're in this mood, they dismantled Collingwood. And we're going to watch a clip here where Nick Dacos didn't actually want to go for the footy. You know, this is it here. He jumped out of the way there because of the brutality of Carlton through that midfield. And I think they have a deeper midfield than the Sydney Swans, and that's where it'll be won and lost.
So, Damo, from your perspective, if the Blues get knocked out in that first final, apart from Blues fans inundating talkback radio for the next week, what is the storyline?
Just that they left themselves with way too much work to do after round 13 when they had just 4 wins to their name and a draw. So the 6 losses in a row that had come before that period, the 8 losses out of the 9-game sequence they endured, it just left them with too much work to do. They're entering the finals, obviously, from 5th spot, not a double chance, which their best form is clearly worthy of. So that'll be the narrative. They'll go away happy that they've managed to retrieve their season in season, but it will be considered a major opportunity loss given that how high-end their best is.
Lloydie, what about last year's grand finalists in the Swans? At least they've got some finals experience in that group. Yeah,
I think they play the MCG really well as well. So for them to win, I think they have to take on Carlton in an outside sort of game. Aggressive ball movement. I think Carlton's defence can be really questioned at times where they can look all at sea. They were terrible last week against the Giants. The first quarter against the Gold Coast Suns the week before, they were off. So I think the Swans have to challenge them in that area. Goulden running off their legs, Blakey, these types can really challenge.
Where are they most vulnerable down back when you highlight it like that?
I think it's more a team defence. Right. Their team defensive structure gets broken down and they can be off if their midfield isn't on top with their clearance work.
Damo, looking at the story of the Sydney Swans, so disappointing that, you know, given that they were the grand finalists, they struggled to make the top 8. What's the narrative going to be if they lose?
Like Carlton, they've fought their way through in season. I think it's admirable in itself, but that will then be reflected upon. We just left ourselves too much work to do, and they've got holes everywhere in the back line. They're going to try and rectify that in the off-season. And look, Rampy's still playing well, McCartan's playing well as well, but they're not at their best, Rampy particularly, and that will be the problem for them. And I think they'll expose that themselves as the area they need to really focus on.
Lloydie, I want a Carlton player that you think is going to step up outside of a Charlie Curnow type. So who you got?
Tom De Koning. I think that why I'm selecting him is he can expose the ageing legs of Hickey. So I'm really worried about Hickey in the ruck. They've had issues in the ruck for a long time. Sydney, they've tried Sinclair, they've tried Hickey, but they haven't quite ever been able to get an A-grade ruckman, and that can hurt you in finals. So this kid's just coming into his 50th, 60th game. He's at the peak of his powers, or he's about to get there, and I think he should go into this game going, I can be the best man on the ground and help my midfield get on top through his running capacity over Hickey.
A Swan for you, Damo? Who's going to stand tall?
Yeah, 3rd season player in Logan McDonald, Nat, and he's better off, weirdly enough, without Buddy Franklin in the team. There's the first piece of vision with Buddy in shot. But look, he's kicked 30 goals from the 19 games he's played this year, and some may feel he hasn't yet quite lived up to the high draft pick that he was, but we know that the key position players take longer than that. I think he's tracking pretty well, and I reckon the final series might actually bring out the absolute best in him quite quickly, and he could become the big swan that they
He's a huge talent, isn't he? I think he's got a big future ahead. I want a tip from both of you. Lloydie, Blues or Swans?
The Blues.
Yeah, Blues on the roll.
Blues for mine as well.